The Valari were a beautiful people, shaped by the seas of their homeworld. Their skin shimmered with pale blue light, their movements graceful like flowing water. For centuries they had been known in the galaxy not for their armies or wealth, but for their art, their music, and their deep knowledge of oceans and currents. Other species often called them the singers of the tides. They were gentle and proud, but they had never learned the hard lessons of survival that came from war or hunger. Now, their harmony was broken. The plague came without warning. At first it was a whisper, small colonies reporting crops turning black, water becoming strange and heavy, and machines failing for no reason. Then it spread. Entire cities of the Valari grew sick. The seas of their homeworld became tainted. Starships that left their harbors carried death with them. Within a year, the Valari star systems were collapsing one after another. Desperate, the Valari Council sent pleas across the galactic network. They asked the great powers for help, the Arkan, the Sarathi, the Malari guilds. They offered everything, minerals from their seabeds, knowledge of ocean-borne energy, even their most precious songs of memory. But the answers that returned were always the same, cold, distant refusals. The Arkan wrote, "Your kind is lost. To aid you would be to risk our own." The Sarathi declared, "Resources must be protected. To waste them on you would be illogical." The guild simply said, "Your systems will be reclaimed when you are gone." That is all. The galaxy turned its back. For the Valari, it was a wound deeper than the plague itself. They had given beauty to the stars, yet when they cried out, no one answered. No one, except the humans. Humanity was new to the galactic stage. Their ships were small, their colonies scattered. The elder races looked down on them, calling them reckless, short-lived, and naive. Yet when the Valari message reached Earth, something stirred. Perhaps it was because humans knew what it felt like to be ignored. Perhaps it was because of their stubborn belief that no one should suffer alone. And so a single ship came. The vessel was not sleek or powerful. It was a converted exploration cruiser called the Resolute Dawn. Its hull carried the marks of long journeys, patchwork repairs, scratches from meteor dust, a paint job faded by light years of travel. But to the Valari, it was a spark in the dark. Commander Elias Kane stood at the bridge window as the ship entered Valari space. His eyes were steady, though the crew around him shifted with unease. Everyone knew this mission was dangerous. If the plague was as deadly as reports claimed, even humans might not escape its reach. Beside him, Dr. Mira Hassan studied the readings on her screen. She was the ship's chief scientist, a woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. Her voice was calm, though Kane could sense the tension behind it. "The environment is unstable," she said. "Water samples show heavy contamination. Life support systems will have to work overtime." Kane gave a slow nod. "We knew it wouldn't be easy." He looked out again at the Valari world below. The oceans shimmered with a sickly hue, their once clear waters clouded with strange patterns. From orbit, entire coastal cities looked abandoned. It was as if an entire people had been swallowed by silence. When the humans landed, the Valari were waiting. The delegation that approached the landing site moved with the same grace their species was known for, but their beauty was dimmed by sorrow. Their leader, Counselor Solari, was tall and slender, her skin pale from sickness. Her voice trembled like a fading song as she spoke. "You came," she whispered, almost in disbelief. "We thought the stars had forgotten us." Kane stepped forward. He was not a man of many words, but his tone carried weight. "No one deserves to be left behind. Not while we can help." Solari's eyes flickered with emotion, doubt, hope, and fear all tangled together. The Valari had been betrayed by so many. Could these humans truly mean what they said? They were weak by galactic standards, hardly capable of protecting themselves. Why would they choose to risk everything for strangers? Still, the humans began their work. They brought portable water purifiers, small machines that could cleanse a pond or well within hours. They set up medical tents offering simple treatments that eased fevers and pain. They distributed food rations, crude compared to Valari cuisine but enough to keep families alive. To the great civilizations of the galaxy, these things would have seemed pitifully small, but to the Valari starved of hope, they were miracles. Children gathered around the human volunteers, staring with wide, curious eyes. Some even touched their strange skin and hair, whispering to each other about the newcomers. For the first time in months, laughter was heard in Valari streets. At night, When the humans rested, they heard the Valari sing. The songs were soft and haunting, like the sound of waves crashing against distant cliffs. The lyrics spoke of loss but also of endurance. Dr. Hassan often sat quietly during these songs, recording them in her notes. "They sing even when their world is dying," she said softly one evening. "It's extraordinary," Kane only nodded. He was a soldier, not a poet, but even he felt the weight of the melodies. They were like promises whispered into the dark. "We will not be forgotten." But as the days passed, Kane also saw the truth. The plague was spreading faster than they had thought. Purifiers could not cleanse entire oceans. Medicines could only ease symptoms, not cure them. The Valari were grateful, but gratitude alone would not save them. One evening, as Kane studied reports in the command tent, Solari entered quietly. Her expression was tired, her voice hesitant. "Commander Kane," she said, "why do you do this?" The others turned from us. "Even our oldest allies, yet you bring your people here. You risk yourselves. For what?" Kane looked up from his screen. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he thought of Earth, of the centuries when humanity had struggled alone, of wars and disasters, of times when survival had seemed impossible. And yet somehow they had endured, not because they were strong, but because they helped each other, even when it seemed hopeless. Finally, he said simply, "Because someone has to." Solari studied him for a long time. Then slowly she bowed her head. For the Valari, it was a gesture of deep respect. That night she sang with her people, and for the first time, the humans joined. Their voices were rough, untrained, but honest. The blending of human tones with Valari harmonies created something new, a song that carried into the night air like a promise. The Valari began to believe again. Yet deep in her laboratory, Dr. Hassan frowned over her readings. The plague was strange, far too precise to be natural. She saw patterns in its spread, hints of design hidden in the chaos. Something about it whispered of intention, as though the Valari were not victims of chance but of someone's choice. She said nothing yet, not until she was sure. But in her heart, a terrible thought began to grow. The Valari oceans no longer sang with their old beauty. Their waters, once clear as crystal, were heavy and dull. Even the air above the shores carried a bitter scent, like iron and rot. Yet amid this decay, something unexpected had begun to bloom. Trust. The humans had only been on Valari Prime for a short time, but their presence already shifted the mood of the people. Where once despair ruled, now there were small sparks of hope. Families who had stopped speaking now shared food with human volunteers. Children who once hid in silence now laughed when a crew member taught them simple Earth games. The galaxy had abandoned them, but humanity had stayed. Commander Elias Kane noticed the change most clearly during his morning walks through the camps. The Valari, tall and elegant, though weakened, would greet him with small nods or quiet songs as he passed. At first, their eyes had been full of suspicion, asking silently, "What do you want from us?" Now they carried a different question. Could it be true that you came only to help? He never promised them miracles. He only promised they would not be left alone. Dr. Mira Hassan was working tirelessly. She spent long hours bent over her instruments, studying samples of tainted water and tissues affected by the plague. The Valari had already tried to understand the disease with their advanced methods, but they had failed. Mira approached it differently. She used Earth's way of testing, simple step-by-step experiments. Where other species preferred strict traditions and rules, she improvised. She tried odd combinations, thought outside the rigid patterns. Her assistants, both human and Valari, often watched in surprise.
"Why mix those?"
one Valari asked once as she combined a strange algae sample with a common Earth bacteria culture. Mira only smiled and said, "Because no one's tried it before. Sometimes answers hide in strange places." The Valari admired her persistence. It was unlike anything they had seen. Their own scientists tended to follow the same paths for centuries, cautious and unwilling to break from tradition. Humans, they realized, did not fear mistakes. They learned from them. Meanwhile, the rest of the crew worked on practical needs. Portable purifiers were set up along the coasts, turning poisoned pools into clean drinking water. Engineers repurposed broken Valari towers into makeshift shelters. Others taught Valari families how to maintain human devices, so that when the humans left, The tools would remain useful. At night, the camps came alive with a new tradition. The Villari sang as they had always done. Their voices rose like waves in the stillness. But now humans joined in, not in the same elegant harmonies, but with raw, deep tones. The blend was strange yet beautiful, like two rivers meeting and forming a greater stream. Solari, the counselor who had first greeted Cain, began to sit with him often by the shore. She was curious about these strange visitors who risked themselves for no reward. One evening, as the sun dipped into the ocean and painted the horizon gold, she asked him, "Your people, do you not fear wasting your strength? You are small compared to the others. To help us may cost you dearly." Cain listened to the sound of waves before answering. "Maybe it will," he admitted. "But humanity has always been small compared to the challenges we faced. That never stopped us. We don't measure worth by size or strength. We measure it by whether we did the right thing when it mattered." Solari tilted her head, studying him with her luminous eyes. "The others say you are reckless, unpredictable." Cain chuckled softly. "They're not wrong. But sometimes, reckless is what saves lives." For the first time in many months, Solari allowed herself to smile. The bond between humans and Villari grew stronger when the children became the bridge. Human crew members brought small devices to show them. Simple holographic projectors that displayed moving animals from Earth, lions, dolphins, birds in flight. The Villari children gasped in wonder at the strange creatures. Some laughed when they saw dolphins leap through waves, their shapes oddly familiar. One child asked, "Are these your ocean singers?" Mira knelt beside her and explained, "Yes, on our world dolphins sing too. They play in the water like you do. Perhaps one day our people and yours will share oceans together." The child touched her hand lightly, a Villari gesture of gratitude. Moments like this carried more healing than any medicine. But not everyone trusted so easily. Some Villari elders whispered in private that the humans must have hidden reasons. Why would they risk themselves when the galaxy's greatest powers had refused? Some feared it was a trick, that humans wanted control of Villari knowledge once their people were too weak to resist. Cain knew about these doubts. He did not fight them with speeches. Instead, he and his crew kept working day after day, proving through action rather than words that their mission was sincere. Slowly, the whispers began to fade. Dr. Hassan, however, grew more troubled. Her test revealed strange patterns in the plague. It was too consistent, too sharp in its progression. Natural diseases usually carried random changes, but this one spread like a carefully drawn map. She did not share her full suspicions yet, but in her notes she wrote, "This may not be natural." The Villari noticed her growing unease. One assistant asked, "Doctor, why do you not rest?" "You look weary," Mira answered with a tired smile. "Because every hour I work might be an hour someone lives instead of dies." The Villari fell silent, humbled by the devotion of this short-lived human who gave so much for them. One evening, a storm rolled across the ocean. The Villari huddled in their shelters as rain fell heavy and lightning danced across the sky. Power flickered. Tents shook. In the middle of the storm, one of the purifiers broke down. Without it, an entire section of the camp would lose clean water. The Villari panicked, but the humans rushed into the rain, working together to fix the machine. They used patchwork repairs, tools held together with tape and determination. By dawn, soaked and exhausted, they had the purifier running again. When the Villari saw the humans stumbling back into camp, drenched but smiling, something shifted deeply in their hearts. These were not saviors with grand promises. They were companions, willing to suffer alongside them. That day, Solari gathered her people and spoke. "The galaxy turned its back on us, but the humans remain. Let us walk with them, not as masters and guests, but as friends." From then on, Villari volunteers began working side by side with the human crew. They helped repair machines, carried supplies, and even began learning human languages. In return, the humans listened to Villari songs, studied their water lore, and ate their sea-grown foods. It was not just survival anymore. It was the birth of something new, a partnership. Yet even as trust deepened, danger grew. Mira finally confirmed what she had feared. The plague's structure was artificial. Someone had made it. It was not chance, not nature. It was design. One night, as she looked out over the dark ocean, she whispered to Cain, "This was meant to destroy them." Cain stared at her in silence, his jaw tightening. If she was right, then this was not only a tragedy, it was a crime. And if it was a crime, then somewhere in the galaxy someone wanted the Valari erased. For now, he kept the truth quiet. The Valari had only just begun to hope again. But deep inside, Kane knew. The humans had stepped into something far larger than a plague. The sea was calm that evening, but Dr. Mira Hassan's mind was restless. She sat inside her small laboratory tent, surrounded by glowing screens and jars of samples. Her fingers moved quickly across the controls as she studied the plague's strange patterns. For weeks she had suspected the truth, but now she was certain. The plague was not natural, it was too sharp, too clean. The way it spread across water systems was precise, almost mathematical. Every sample carried the same repeating codes like hidden symbols. Diseases usually changed as they spread. This one did not. It acted like a machine following instructions. Mira leaned back in her chair, exhaustion heavy in her eyes. She whispered to herself, "This is no accident. Someone made this." She thought of the Valari still singing at night, still working with hope because of the humans beside them. How could she tell them their suffering was no mistake of nature, but the result of someone's cruel plan? The tent flap opened. Commander Elias Kane stepped inside. His boots were damp from the shoreline, his face shadowed by worry. "You've been here all day," he said. "You missed the evening meal." Mira looked at him, unsure of how much to say. Finally, she slid one of the screens toward him. It showed the repeating symbols inside the plague's code. "This isn't nature, Elias. This was engineered." Kane studied the screen. He was not a scientist, but even he could see the pattern. His jaw tightened. "Engineered by who?" "That," Mira said quietly, "is the question. But whoever did this, they wanted the Valari gone. This is targeted destruction." The words hung heavy in the air. For a long moment, Kane said nothing. Then he rubbed his forehead and muttered, "So this isn't just about survival anymore. This is about someone trying to erase them." Mira nodded. "And we're standing right in the middle of it." The next day, Kane called a meeting with Solari and a few trusted Valari leaders. He did not share every detail. Mira had advised against spreading fear, but he made it clear the plague was unnatural. Solari's expression grew grave. "So we are not victims of fate. We are victims of choice." "Yes," Kane said. "And that means the galaxy's silence is no accident either. Someone powerful wanted this to happen. And the others—" He paused. They looked the other way. The Valari leaders exchanged worried glances. Some whispered angrily. Others looked at the humans with fresh gratitude, realizing more than ever that only they had chosen to stand beside them. Solari turned back to Kane. Her voice was steady but sorrowful. "If you are right, then we are more alone than we believed. Yet still you came." Kane's answer was simple, because it was the right thing to do. Meanwhile, Mira and her Valari assistants worked day and night to trace the plague's origin. They compared samples from different colonies, studying the subtle differences. Finally, one clue stood out. A fragment of alien coding embedded deep inside the pathogen's structure. It was not Valarian design. It belonged to a style known well across the galaxy, the mark of the Milari guilds. The guilds were one of the most powerful trade networks in the stars. They controlled shipping lanes, supply chains, and vast fortunes. If they wanted Valari territory, they had the resources to take it. By removing the Valari with a plague, they could claim the oceans and resources without ever firing a shot. Mira brought her discovery to Kane. He listened quietly, then clenched his fists. "So it's them. The cowards don't even wage war. They poison from the shadows." "What do we do with this knowledge?" Mira asked. "If we expose them, the guilds will strike back. They are powerful. We are few." Kane's face hardened. "Then we stand taller. Truth matters more than their power." The humans began preparing evidence, data samples, coded records, comparisons that would prove the plague was engineered. But they knew the risk. If word spread too early, the guilds might erase the proof before the galaxy could hear it. Solari warned them. "You are new to the stars. The guilds will crush you if you threaten their secrets." Kane only replied, "Let them try. Humanity doesn't scare easy." But not all Valari believed so easily. In the camps, whispers returned. Some wondered if the humans had brought the plague themselves in order to play the role of saviors. The guilds had spread lies before, and suspicion was a poison that spread faster than any disease. One night, A group of Valari elders confronted Cain. Their leader, an older male named Rishal, spoke sharply. "You say others betrayed us, but how do we know it is not you? You arrived when no one else came. You bring cures, but perhaps you also bring the sickness." Cain stood tall. His voice was calm, but every word carried weight. "If we wanted your end, we would not stand in your storms patching your purifiers in the rain. We would not risk our lives eating the same food and breathing the same poisoned air. We are here because no one else would be." Rishal stared at him for a long time. Then slowly his anger softened. He bowed his head slightly. "Perhaps I judged too quickly." Still, Cain knew trust was fragile. He had to protect it. Days passed and the evidence against the guilds grew stronger. Mira found more coding fragments, all pointing to the same source. Valari engineers working with her confirmed it. This was no accident of nature. Meanwhile, the human crew worked with Valari volunteers to expand their shelters and clean more water. Each small victory brought hope. But with hope came danger. Strange messages began appearing on the Valari networks. Warnings to stop searching. Threats written in coded trade symbols. The guilds knew someone was getting close. One night, Mira found her equipment tampered with. Data files were missing. Whoever had done it was skilled, they left almost no trace. But one small clue remained. A fragment of a signal pointing to a ship orbiting far above the planet. When Cain heard, his face darkened. "They're watching us." Solari's voice shook with anger. "So it is true. They poison our seas, then watch us drown." "Not anymore," Cain said. "We'll make sure the galaxy sees them for what they are." But the challenge was clear. Humanity was small. Their voices were weak compared to the mighty civilizations. To expose the guilds, they would need undeniable proof. And to survive long enough to share it, they would need allies. That night, Cain gathered his crew. The Valari leaders joined them. The campfire flickered between them as the waves whispered in the distance. Cain spoke with steady resolve. "We came here to help, but we found something greater than we expected. This is not just a plague. This is an attempt to erase a people." The galaxy looked away. "But we won't. We will carry the truth even if it costs us everything." Mira added softly, "Because truth is the only cure for lies." The Valari looked at one another. Their songs had always carried sorrow, but now they carried strength. Celery rose and declared, "Then we will stand with you. If the guilds want silence, we will sing louder. If they want us gone, we will endure. And with the humans beside us, we will not fade." The humans and Valari joined hands across the circle. Two small peoples fragile in the vast galaxy, yet stronger together than anyone expected. Above them in the silent orbit, unseen eyes watched. The guilds were preparing their response, but down below on the shores of a poisoned sea, humanity and Valari had made a choice. They would not hide. They would not bow. They would fight, not with weapons but with truth, trust, and the unyielding courage to stand when the galaxy turned away. The hidden enemy had revealed its hand, and now humanity was ready to play its part. The sun rose over Valari Prime, casting a pale, trembling light across oceans poisoned by the plague. Yet something had begun to shine brighter than the morning rays. Hope. Human ingenuity had become the heart of survival on the planet. Commander Elias Cain walked along the shores, observing the shelters and purifiers the crew had constructed. Valari families now moved freely between them, carrying food, water, and laughter. For the first time, the horizon was no longer empty of promise. Dr. Mira Hassan stood nearby, examining a new water sample. "The contamination levels are dropping," she said, a hint of excitement in her voice. "If we keep this pace, we might be able to reclaim entire coastal cities within a week." Cain nodded, but his mind was already planning the next step. This was no longer just about survival. It was about proving that the Valari could rise again, even when the galaxy had abandoned them. The humans had an advantage the other species often lacked: adaptability. Where the Valari had once followed rigid structures for purification and containment, the humans experimented boldly. They combined old Valari towers with earth filtration systems, creating massive water cleaning stations. They used solar panels scavenged from abandoned facilities to power them. And most importantly, they trained Valari volunteers to operate and maintain the systems. The Valari watched in awe. Here were creatures small in size, untested in galactic warfare yet capable of solving impossible problems with patience, creativity, and sheer stubbornness. Children mimicked the humans, climbing towers, carrying buckets, and learning to measure water pH with small devices. Each day, humanity's reputation among the Volari grew, not as conquerors or masters, but as companions who shared their toil and sweat. Solari walked alongside Kane one afternoon as they inspected a newly restored harbor. "Your people. You find solutions where we see only despair," she said. "How do you do it?" Kane smiled slightly, wiping his brow. "We just keep trying. We don't give up because something is hard, and we never leave anyone behind." Solari's eyes glimmered. "Perhaps that is why we needed you. Not because of your power, but because of your courage to care." Meanwhile, Mira and her Volari assistants worked tirelessly in their lab to develop a cure. The plague was artificial, yes, but it still had biological weaknesses. By observing its structure, Mira discovered that it reacted to certain algae compounds. With careful blending, they could neutralize the pathogen in water and food, and slow its spread in living Volari. They tested small doses first. A few sick children were given the solution, and within days their fevers broke. Slowly the cure began to work. The humans and Volari scientists worked in tandem, combining the Volari's deep knowledge of ocean biology with human ingenuity and experimental methods. The first complete cure was a mixture of simple ingredients: algae, purified water, and a trace of a mineral common on Volari beaches. It required precision, patience, and constant monitoring. Yet when it succeeded, the humans celebrated not with pride but with quiet relief. Lives had been saved. Word of the cure spread quickly. Other Volari colonies, still isolated, began sending messengers requesting help. Kane's team was small, but the humans had taught the Volari how to replicate their methods. Now Volari volunteers from distant cities were able to administer the cure and purify water independently. The impact was immediate. Coastal cities slowly began to sparkle again. Water became clear, fish returned, and families who had abandoned hope now dared to plan for the future. Humanity had not only saved the Volari, they had given them the tools to save themselves. And yet, the guilds were not idle. Messages arrived, encoded and threatening, attempting to frighten the Volari into stopping the cure. The guilds wanted secrecy, control, and the continuation of the plague, but their words carried no weight. The humans had already proven that action mattered more than threats. Solari addressed her people in a large gathering by the ocean. "They threatened us, hoping we would fear," she said. "But we have learned from the humans. Courage is stronger than fear. Today we take back our homes, our seas, and our future." The crowd erupted in cheers. Humanity stood among them, smiling quietly, watching the Volari reclaim not only their lands but their spirit. At night, Kane and Mira discussed their next challenge. While the cure worked, it had to be distributed to every corner of Volari Prime, and eventually to other colonies. Time was critical, and the guilds could attempt to intervene at any moment. "We need a plan to move faster," Mira said, tracing maps of colonies and routes. "We can't be everywhere at once." Kane considered the ocean currents, old Volari transport systems, and human improvisations. "We'll create mobile teams," he said. "Small groups equipped with water purifiers, cure doses, and communication devices. We send them to the hardest-hit areas first. The rest follow," Solari agreed. "We will join them. Our people are strong, and our knowledge of the seas will guide them." And so small convoys of humans and Volari set out, braving storms, rough waters, and isolation. Each convoy carried hope, and each success brought more confidence to both species. One evening, a convoy returned with an astonishing report. A distant colony, long thought lost, had been fully restored. Families had reunited. Children were singing again. Entire cities had begun to flourish. The humans and Volari celebrated together, sharing meals and stories under the stars. It was a turning point. The plague, which had seemed unstoppable, now appeared beatable. Humanity's persistence, creativity, and willingness to work alongside the Volari had changed the course of the disaster. The Volari began to see humans not just as allies, but as symbols of hope. Their songs now included verses about courage, about small beings who refused to give up, and who fought not with weapons but with determination and care. Yet, while light returned to Volari cities, shadows lingered. Mira had traced more guild signals. The enemy was still watching, still plotting. But the humans had learned an important lesson. Fear was only powerful if it was allowed to control action. Kane looked out over the ocean one night, the waves reflecting starlight. "They think they can scare us," he said to Solari. "They think small people cannot make a difference. But they are wrong. Humanity has faced worse odds before, and we are not alone." Solari nodded, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You have taught us a new kind of strength. Not the strength of weapons or money or fleets, but the strength of persistence, of trust, and of standing together." Mira joined them holding a new water sample, "And we are ready to continue. Every colony, every family, we will finish what we started." Kane smiled. "Then let's show the galaxy something they never expected. The Valari will rise and we'll make sure everyone sees it." As dawn approached, a quiet energy filled Valari Prime. The oceans glimmered faintly with renewed life. Shelters, purifiers, and water cleaning stations dotted the shores. Small children ran along the beaches laughing. Valari adults worked alongside humans to repair towers and equipment, and above it all the stars seemed brighter, reflecting the promise of unity, courage, and hope. In the face of abandonment, humanity had become the light in the void. They had proven that small, determined beings could change the course of a disaster, heal a suffering species, and stand up to a galaxy that had turned its back. The guilds might still lurk in shadows, planning their next move. The plague had once threatened to erase a people, but now, thanks to human ingenuity, compassion, and courage, the Valari were alive. Their songs would continue. Their oceans would sparkle again, and the galaxy would not forget that even when everyone else turned away, humans had stood beside them. The ocean waves of Valari Prime were calm that morning. Sunlight shimmered on the restored waters, reflecting the colors of hope and life. Birds rare on this planet for months returned to the shores. Fish swam near the surface once more, and the cities that had been abandoned now buzzed with activity. It had been a long journey. Weeks of work, sleepless nights, and endless planning had brought the Valari back from the brink. And all along, humans had stood beside them, not as rulers, not as conquerors, but as partners. Commander Elias Kane stood atop one of the largest towers overlooking the restored harbor. His eyes scanned the horizon. Ships from distant Valari colonies began arriving, each carrying families who had been scattered across the seas. Children ran along the docks, waving to their parents as they stepped off. Kane allowed himself a small smile. The work had been worth it. Beside him, Dr. Mira Hassan adjusted her equipment. She had been monitoring the water systems to ensure no remnants of the plague remained. Her tired eyes reflected relief. "Every system is stable now," she said softly. "The cure worked, and the Valari are recovering faster than we could have imagined." Solari joined them, her tall form radiant despite the months of suffering. She looked out over her people with pride. "You did more than help us survive," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "You taught us to trust again. You reminded us what it means to have hope." Kane shook his head slightly. "We didn't teach you anything you didn't already know. Your people are strong, adaptable, and resilient. We only showed what happens when you refuse to give up." Word of the Valari recovery spread across the galaxy faster than anyone could have predicted. Messages from other species began to arrive, some curious, some skeptical, and some shocked. The great powers who had ignored the Valari were watching closely. The Melari guilds, realizing their secret was exposed, scrambled to cover their tracks. But evidence gathered by humans and Valari was too clear. The plague had been engineered. The guilds had tried to manipulate the galaxy into looking away, but they had underestimated two things: human determination and Valari resilience. Solari addressed a gathering of her people that evening. The council chamber, normally reserved for formal meetings, was filled with citizens eager to hear her words. Children climbed on chairs to see, elders leaned forward with hope, and humans stood quietly at the edges. "The guild sought to erase us," she began, her voice carrying across the chamber. "They thought we would fall into despair, that we would vanish without a trace. But they underestimated the strength of our allies. They underestimated humanity." A murmur of agreement swept through the crowd. Humans had proven themselves in every way that mattered. Not through weapons, wealth, or political power, but through courage, loyalty, and ingenuity. Celery continued. "These beings, small by the standards of the galaxy, stood by us when no one else would. They risked themselves and never faltered. For that we will honor them forever. Humanity will always have a place among our people." Kane felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Recognition was never his goal, but hearing it from the Valari themselves was deeply satisfying. He glanced at Mira, who nodded quietly, understanding the unspoken gratitude in his eyes. The humans did not stop with Valari Prime. Using the systems and knowledge they had shared, they helped rebuild distant colonies. Mobile teams traveled to isolated islands, ruined cities, and forgotten outposts, spreading the cure and repairing water systems. The Valari learned quickly, and soon, they could sustain themselves without constant human oversight. This was precisely what Kane had wanted. Humans were not here to rule or control. Their goal was to ensure that the Valari could thrive on their own, stronger and more united than before. Amid the reconstruction, a great convocation was called. Representatives from many species gathered on Valari Prime, expecting to see a broken people, still at the mercy of circumstance. The guild sent their officials worried and calculating, unsure how the humans had succeeded where they had failed. But what they found was remarkable. The Valari arrived not only healthy but thriving. Cities sparkled under the light of restored waters. Children sang songs of hope and courage. Adults worked together in harmony, their skill and knowledge evident in every repair and rebuilt structure. At the front of the gathering, Solari stood tall. Humans stood beside her, not as bodyguards, not as rulers, but as equals. Their eyes reflected pride, not arrogance. And then Solari spoke. "The galaxy turned its back on us," she began. "But these humans did not. When others abandoned us, they chose to stand beside us. They did not seek reward, nor did they act for glory. They acted because it was right. Today, the Valari stand not because of wealth, technology, or fleets, but because we have allies who understand courage, loyalty, and compassion." Kane listened quietly as her words echoed across the convocation chamber. Mira's hand brushed against his arm in quiet solidarity. The humans' role was clear. They had transformed from outsiders to a species whose character now shone brighter than any starship. The guilds attempted to respond, but their words rang hollow. They had counted on fear and secrecy. They had counted on silence. But truth, like the water flowing through Valari Prime, could not be contained. Evidence, courage, and solidarity had exposed them. And in that moment, Kane realized something important. Humans were more than just survivors. They were catalysts. They could transform despair into hope, weakness into strength, and abandonment into unity. The Valari sang again that evening, their voices rising above the ocean waves. But this time, the song included new voices, human voices blending with theirs, creating harmonies that had never existed before. It was a song of triumph, of trust, and of shared determination. Solari turned to Kane and Mira. "This song will travel across the stars," she said. "It will tell every species the truth. Humanity is not to be underestimated. They do not abandon those in need, and when they fight for what is right, they fight with every part of themselves." Kane's lips curved into a faint smile. "Then let it travel. Let everyone hear it." In the following weeks, the galaxy began to take notice. News of the Valari's survival spread, and alongside it, stories of humans who had made the difference. Other civilizations who had once dismissed humanity began to reconsider their assumptions. Small, seemingly insignificant humans had become a symbol of hope, a living proof that character mattered more than size, power, or wealth. For the Valari, the humans' deeds were unforgettable. Schools taught the history of how humanity had arrived when no one else came. Children learned the stories of courage and kindness. Monuments were built near purified harbors, not to honor the humans as conquerors, but to remind everyone of what it meant to stand with those in need. Kane and Mira watched the rebuilding, knowing their work was not done. Humanity had taken a stand, and the Valari had grown stronger, but the galaxy was vast, and challenges would always arise. Yet for the first time, Kane felt certain of one thing. Humans had earned a place among the stars, not through force or domination, but through courage, ingenuity, and compassion. The final evening came quietly. The ocean reflected the setting sun in a brilliant display of light and color. The Valari gathered along the shores, humans among them, to sing one last song together. It was no longer a song of despair. It was a song of life, trust, and unbroken hope. Solari raised her voice, and the humans followed. The melody grew, stronger with each note, reaching across the waves and rising into the skies. Ships from distant colonies listened, and even the stars seemed to shine brighter as if witnessing a triumph that transcended worlds. Kane looked at the horizon, the weight of months lifting from his shoulders. We came because no one else would, he said softly. But in the end, we all stand taller together. Mira nodded. We've shown them what humans can do. Not with weapons, not with fleets, but with courage and care. Silari's eyes glistened. And because of that, humanity will always have a place among the stars. You stood with us when everyone else turned away. That is a legacy no one can erase. As night fell, the Valari and humans sat along the shores, the ocean whispering against the sand. Stars reflected in their eyes, and the song of hope lingered in the air. The plague was gone, the enemy exposed, and the galaxy had finally witnessed the truth. When all others abandon a people, humanity does not. They had fought without weapons, healed without magic, and inspired without grand armies. And in doing so, they had claimed something far greater, a reputation that would endure across generations. Humanity had stood beside the Valari. The Valari had survived, and the galaxy had learned a lesson it would never forget. Courage, loyalty, and compassion are the greatest power in the universe. The stars themselves seemed to shine brighter that night, as if applauding the smallest species with the largest heart. Humanity had found its place among them, not because it conquered, but because it chose to care.